Nina Simone was called the High Priestess of Soul for her heart-wrenching voice, but very few people know her dark history. So how did this prodigy rise to international fame, only to spend her final years in isolation? And what's the real story behind the $5 million she left behind when she died in 2003? In this video, we take you inside her abandoned house, a crumbling monument to her brilliance and the battles she fought. From the highs of her musical triumphs to the darkness of her personal life, we uncover the untold truth behind Nina Simone's extraordinary journey. Don't look away. What you'll discover might just break your heart. Born on February 21, 1933 in North Carolina, Nina Simone, then known as Eunice Wayman, was the sixth of 8 children in a large, close-knit family. But even as a child, it was obvious she was different. Music wasn't just a pastime for her. It was a calling. She began playing piano at her local church and gave her first classical recital by the age of 12. But it wasn't just music she had to learn early on. She also had to learn how to fight back. That first recital nearly ended in disaster. Simone's proud parents had taken seats in the front row to watch her play. But then, organizers told them to move to the back, to make room for white attendees. Young Simone didn't hesitate. She refused to play a single note until her parents were allowed to return to the front. That moment set the tone for the rest of her life, defiant, principled, and unafraid. As her career took off, that same fierceness came through in her performances. Her presence on stage was commanding, even intimidating. Audiences didn't always know what to make of her. She carried herself with the poise of a classical pianist, and that regal air earned her the title, the High Priestess of Soul. But that distance also sparked controversy. After graduating high school, she spent the summer studying at Juilliard under famed pianist Carl Friedberg, with her sights set on getting into the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. But instead of a golden ticket to her dream, she was met with heartbreak. Simone's audition for the Curtis Institute of Music was, by all accounts, flawless. Her family was so sure she'd be accepted that they relocated to Philadelphia in anticipation. But when the rejection letter came, it hit like a brick wall. Simone was crushed. She believed, like many still do, that racism was behind the decision. Even worse, Curtis had a strict age limit, no new students over 21. That meant she wouldn't get another shot. For a while, Simone nearly gave up on her dream. But then, she pivoted. She started taking private piano lessons to stay sharp and reluctantly accepted work playing in nightclubs. It was there, under dim lights and on smoky stages, that fate stepped in. To cut costs, the club owner told her she had to sing as well as play. Simone agreed reluctantly, but the moment she opened her mouth to sing, everything changed. That voice, the same one that would soon echo through civil rights marches and concert halls, was born. Of course, her nightclub gigs weren't something her devout family would have approved of. So, she created a new identity, Nina Simone. Nina came from a nickname her boyfriend gave her. Simone was inspired by French actress Simone Signoret. Under this new name, she could perform freely, without the weight of her past or the judgment of her community. In 1958, just as her career was taking off, Simone made a choice that would haunt her. At 25, she married Don Ross, a white fairground worker she barely knew. The relationship unraveled almost immediately. Simone soon realized she had made a mistake. The marriage ended quickly, but tragically, it wouldn't be the last time her heart would be broken. In 1959, Nina Simone released her debut album, Little Girl Blue, and with it, made a career move she'd later regret deeply. Though the album was a breakout success, Simone disliked its more commercial tracks, and in a decision she'd come to mourn, sold the rights to the label for a small one-time payment. That choice cost her millions in royalties and haunted her for the rest of her life. By the early 1960s, Simone had fallen in love again, this time with New York police detective Andrew Stroud. They married in 1961, and Stroud quickly became both her manager and the father of her only child, Lisa Simone Kelly. From the outside, it may have looked like a solid and respectable match, but behind the scenes, their relationship was dark and violent. The red flags were there from the start. Stroud, already a three-time divorcee, physically assaulted Simone the very day they got engaged. Still, she went through with the marriage and gradually surrendered more control over her life and career to him. It would be years before she finally escaped his grip, emotionally, professionally, and physically. As Simone's fame grew, so did her intensity on stage. No longer reserved, she became known for scolding audiences she felt were disrespectful, calling them out mid-performance or even storming off stage entirely. At first, it was seen as bold, but over time, her outbursts became more frequent and more unsettling. In one of the most unsettling moments of her life, Nina Simone's inner turmoil surfaced in a haunting way. In 1967, her husband Andrew Stroud found her in the dressing room doing something bizarre, trying to rub makeup into her hair. When he asked why, her answer was cryptic and chilling. She said she was trying to match her hair to her skin, describing surreal visions of laser beams and heaven where skin, always skin, was involved somehow. It was a glimpse into the fragile state of mind she often kept hidden behind the piano. But even as her personal life unraveled, Simone's voice grew louder. In 1964, she released Mississippi Goddamn, a blistering protest anthem written in response to the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing and the growing racial violence in America. She called the song like throwing 10 bullets back, born from a surge of fury, grief, and righteous rage. But before she put pen to paper, she nearly took a darker path. Simone later admitted that her first instinct was not to write a song, but to seek revenge. In her fury, she even attempted to build a makeshift gun, confessing, "I had it in my mind to go out and kill someone." That raw anger fueled her deep involvement in the civil rights movement. She marched in Selma, built friendships with figures like Malcolm X and Langston Hughes, and performed for the cause whenever and wherever she could. But standing up came with a steep cost. By the 1970s, Nina Simone believed her outspokenness had come at a steep price. She claimed her career had taken a nosedive because of her activism. Calls stopped coming in, bookings dried up, and she felt like the music world had shut its doors on her. Disillusioned and angry, Simone made a drastic decision. She packed her bags and left the U.S. without telling almost anyone, settling on the island of Barbados for what she thought would be a quiet escape. But things didn't unfold the way she expected. Simone assumed her husband and manager, Andrew Stroud, would eventually reach out with performance offers. That call never came. When she left, she had placed her wedding ring on the table, a silent but clear message. Stroud took it as a sign their marriage was over, and the two separated in 1970. In Barbados, Simone found more than just solitude. She also found a lover, one who just happened to be Errol Barrow, the Prime Minister of Barbados. Their affair was passionate, intense, and completely scandalous. Barrow was not only one of the island's most powerful men, he was also very much married. Though the two shared a deep connection, Barrow wasn't willing to risk his career for love, and eventually the affair fizzled out, leaving Simone once again adrift. For all the heartbreak with Prime Minister Errol Barrow, Nina Simone didn't exactly wallow in loneliness. In fact, she seemed to bounce back just fine. And fast. Barrow wasn't the only man in her life during her time in Barbados. While living at a local hotel, Simone struck up a passionate affair with a porter, diving into yet another fleeting but fiery romance. For Simone, love, or at least intimacy, was never in short supply. Her diaries from this era reveal a deep obsession with sex and connection, whether she was in a relationship or not. The men changed frequently. From hotel staff to plantation owners to foreign writers, Simone kept moving, emotionally and physically. After her time in Barbados, Simone set her sights on Liberia, hoping for a fresh start. But if anything, things grew darker. While she drifted across countries in pursuit of freedom and reinvention, she left behind one of the most important people in her life, her daughter, Lisa. Left in the care of friends and her father, Lisa grew up largely without her mother. And when she did decide to reunite with Simone in Liberia, it became a haunting turning point. Lisa had once thought of her mother as her protector from her father's harshness. But that illusion shattered quickly. Now she was the one doing the beating, Lisa later revealed, recalling a terrifying chapter of emotional and physical abuse. The trauma ran so deep that Lisa even contemplated ending her own life before fleeing back home. The truth was, few understood the internal chaos Simone was battling during those years. Her personal life was a whirlwind, but her professional one wasn't faring much better. Isolated from the American music industry and cut off from steady work, Simone grew desperate to regain control over her finances. She hired a man in Liberia to help manage her affairs, a decision that ended in brutal betrayal. After discovering he had racked up massive hotel bills in her name, Simone confronted him. His reaction was chilling. He beat her mercilessly. That act of violence pushed Simone to the edge. Nina Simone's life was a symphony of rage and brilliance, with every note tinged by a deep, unrelenting pain. By the 1970s, that righteous fire, once channeled into groundbreaking music and fearless civil rights activism, began to turn inward. Beneath her towering presence was a woman unraveling. Depression crept in, quiet but suffocating, until it became too much. At one of her lowest points, Simone attempted to end her life with a heavy dose of sleeping pills. Though she survived, the scars of that moment never fully healed. It wasn't just the world she was angry with, it was herself too. But Simone was nothing if not unpredictable. That same fire that consumed her also fueled her resilience. She could swing from furious confrontation to charm in seconds. Eric Burden of the Animals once found himself on the receiving end of her wrath after his band's hit version of "Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood," a song Simone had first recorded. Furious at what she saw as an artistic theft, she tore into Burden. But when he reminded her that she herself had covered prison songs, her anger vanished. "Sit down," she said, suddenly calm. "What would you like to drink?" There were always two Simones, the defiant icon and the deeply wounded woman. At a London performance in the 70s, her infamous lateness began to wear thin with the audience. Some fans booed, others stayed loyal. In a rare moment of softness, Simone turned to the crowd and said, "Those of you who are clapping, give me your phone numbers so I can call you when I'm feeling down." But the kindness never lasted long. By the 1980s, Simone's mental state was in steep decline. Her legendary temper no longer needed a stage to explode. One day, while shopping with her friend and fellow singer Janice Ian, Simone attempted to return a pair of worn sandals. When the cashier politely refused, Simone pulled out a gun and forced the return. The store employee complied, terrified, and Ian watched in shock. Even close friends weren't safe. At one point, Simone demanded Ian pay her a royalty fee for something unspecified. Ian refused. Simone's response: she ripped a payphone off the wall in fury. It was becoming clear that Simone's life, once defined by elegance and intellect, was now teetering on the edge of chaos. Every outburst, every scorched bridge was a cry for help, one that too often went unanswered. And then one day, that chaos reached a terrifying peak. In one of the most explosive episodes of her life, Nina Simone crossed a line few could imagine. After accusing a record executive of withholding royalties that she rightfully believed were hers, Simone didn't just raise her voice. She raised a gun. With fury in her eyes, she pulled the trigger and fired at the man. Thankfully, she missed. But what came next was even more shocking than the gunshot. Simone later bragged about the incident with chilling pride. They said, "We're not going to give you any money." And I said, "Oh, yes, you are," she recalled in a later interview. "I tried to kill him, but I missed." This wasn't just an outburst. It was the unraveling of a legend. Nina Simone, once the elegant high priestess of soul, was now known as much for her volatility as for her music. But behind that fury was a long-buried truth. Simone had been suffering for years from untreated mental illness. Eventually, doctors diagnosed her with bipolar disorder, a revelation that brought some clarity to decades of emotional turbulence and unpredictable behavior. But for those closest to Simone, the diagnosis was less a shock than a confirmation. Her inner circle had long suspected something was wrong, so much so that by the mid-1960s, Simone had already been secretly prescribed the powerful antipsychotic Trilofan. The catch? She wasn't always willing to take it. On her good days, Simone might grudgingly comply. On the bad ones, she outright refused, leaving caretakers and friends to resort to desperate tactics. They would sometimes hide the medication in her food, slipping it into her meals in hopes of calming her without confrontation. To the outside world, none of this was visible. Her fans saw the brilliance, the beauty, the fire. They didn't see the battles waged behind closed doors. That's why the public outbursts of her later years, the gun, the rage, the erratic behavior, were so shocking. Nina Simone's career was anything but conventional, marked by bursts of brilliance followed by long, haunting silences. She could go from releasing a wave of powerful songs to disappearing from the spotlight for months or even years. But not everyone in the industry understood her rhythm. Simone once claimed that during one particularly bleak period, producers in Paris locked her in a studio and forced her to record the 1978 album Baltimore against her will. The result? An album she had little love for, and an experience that deepened her resentment toward the music business. Her battles weren't just with producers, they were with institutions. In the 60s and 70s, Simone added a new enemy to her growing list: the United States government. A fierce civil rights activist, she long suspected the FBI was keeping tabs on her. Then, in 1978, things escalated. Authorities issued a warrant for her arrest on charges of tax evasion, a charge Simone admitted to, claiming she hadn't paid as an act of protest against a country that oppressed her people. Though she evaded capture and lived in exile, the legal nightmare dragged on for a decade. Simone's contempt for the music industry boiled over in public, too. At one industry event, she took the microphone and laid into the room. "I am a genius. I am not your clown. Most of you people out there are crooks. 5 record companies owe me money." There was outrage, but also undeniable truth in her words. Her activism also hit a heartbreaking note in 1968, after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Just 3 days after his death, Simone stood on stage and gave an unforgettable 18-minute tribute. With tears in her eyes, she told the crowd, "We really didn't expect anybody here tonight. They're shooting us down one by one." Ironically, Simone and King didn't always see eye to eye. While King preached nonviolence, Simone believed in radical, immediate action, even revolution. When they first met, she shook his hand and said bluntly, "I'm not nonviolent." King, ever composed, simply replied, "Not to worry, sister." Just before her death, Nina Simone finally received a bittersweet gesture of recognition. After a lifetime of carrying the sting of rejection from the prestigious Curtis Institute of Music, a moment she believed was rooted in racism. The school tried to make amends by awarding her an honorary degree. Was it too little? Too late? Maybe. But for Simone, who had fought her whole life for dignity and acknowledgement, it was still a powerful full-circle moment. One of her deepest and most intellectually rich friendships was with a raisin-in-the-sun playwright, Lorraine Hansberry. Their bond wasn't built on small talk. It was built on revolution. Simone once recalled, "We never talked about men or clothes. It was always Marx, Lenin, and revolution, real girls' talk. Iconic doesn't even begin to cover it. And speaking of icon status, prepare to be humbled. Simone wrote her searing anthem, Mississippi Goddamn, a song that changed protest music forever, in just 1 hour. Yes, really. Let that sink in. Her genius didn't go unnoticed by fellow greats. Jazz legend Miles Davis was in awe of her ability to play 3-part counterpoint, a mind-bending skill where both hands and her voice would carry separate melodies simultaneously. As difficult as it sounds, Simone pulled it off effortlessly. Nina knew exactly how powerful she was, and she made sure everyone else did too. After receiving an honorary doctorate from Amherst University, she insisted on being addressed as Dr. Nina Simone from then on. And honestly, she earned every syllable. In 1974, at one of the lowest points in her life, Nina Simone received an unexpected lifeline from none other than David Bowie. While in New York City, the two met, and Bowie asked for her number. That same night at 3 a.m., he called her. His message was simple but powerful. "The first thing I want you to know is that you're not crazy. Don't let anybody tell you you're crazy because where you're coming from, there are very few of us out there." It was a moment of recognition between two misunderstood artists. Years later, in 1991, Simone was on a press tour in the U.S., promoting her album, A Single Woman. But trouble followed. Just before a planned appearance on The Tonight Show, she demanded to be paid before she performed. A bold move that didn't sit well with producers. The tour fell apart soon after. By the late 90s, Simone was still performing, but had little patience left for showbiz politics. She often closed her concerts with the defiant anthem My Way, sending a clear message. She was doing things on her terms. But Simone's final years were marked by more than just defiance. They were also filled with chaos. In 1995, during a bipolar episode, she shot her neighbor's son in the leg with an airgun. Why? She claimed he'd made racist remarks, but it all started because his laughter interrupted her piano practice. Just a month later, she struck 2 motorcyclists with her car in France and drove off without stopping, earning herself a hefty fine for the hit and run. By the early 2000s, Nina Simone's health was deteriorating. Diagnosed with breast cancer, she refused to return to the U.S. or even seek hospital care. True to her fiercely independent spirit, she spent her last days quietly at her home in Carry-le-Rouet, France. On April 21, 2003, Nina Simone passed away in her sleep, leaving behind a complex legacy of brilliance, rebellion, and raw truth that still resonates across generations. At the time of her death in 2003, Nina Simone had a net worth estimated at $5 million. That figure included not just her royalties and personal property, but 2 valuable pieces of real estate, a condominium in Los Angeles and a quiet retreat in southern France. But perhaps the most meaningful property connected to Simone's life wasn't one she died in. It was the place where her story began. Simone's earnings during her lifetime came from decades of prolific work as a musician and performer. Her catalog of recordings, live shows, and licensing agreements formed the foundation of her estate. Despite industry exploitation and her often volatile relationships with record labels, her artistry endured, and so did her value. After her death, court documents showed that her estate had grown to between $10 and $12 million by the mid-2010s, bolstered by renewed interest in her music, especially as it was featured in films, commercials, and documentaries. In her final years, Simone lived in Carry-le-Rouet, a serene coastal town near Marseille, France. Her home there was modest but peaceful, a far cry from the turbulence of her life. Nestled along the Mediterranean, it was surrounded by the sea and sun, with quiet streets and bright stucco buildings. This was where she chose to spend her final days, away from the glare of American fame and media. In her will, she asked for the house to be sold and the proceeds given to her brother. Simone also owned a Los Angeles condominium, often referred to as the Franklin condo. She left this home to her daughter, Lisa Simone Kelly. While less is known about the style or features of the L.A. property, its inclusion in the will reflected how Simone had still kept roots in America, despite her extended self-exile overseas. But the most emotional and historically significant property linked to Simone is the small, worn-down, three-room clapboard house in Tryon, North Carolina, where she was born Eunice Wayman and began her musical journey. Left to deteriorate for years, the house was on the verge of demolition in 2017, when four African-American artists, Adam Pendleton, Rashid Johnson, Ellen Gallagher, and Julie Meretu, bought it for $95,000 through their collective Daydream Therapy, LLC. The house had no modern renovations. Its faded exterior, sagging roofline, and creaking floors whispered of poverty and genius, of a girl who practiced piano for hours in a segregated town while dreaming of Bach and Chopin. That structure, so fragile and forgotten, became a symbol of what America nearly allowed to vanish. Thanks to restoration efforts led by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund, and the World Monuments Fund, the home is being preserved as a historical site. Nina Simone's life was filled with genius, fury, heartbreak, and beauty, and the homes she left behind tell a powerful story of where she came from and what she overcame. But what do you think about Nina Simone's journey? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into music legends, their lives, their losses, and the places they left behind, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.